careers. Thank you. The careers workforce. This is a topic area that has really started to take a lot of traction and a lot of movement across the sector, and one I think that we're really pleased to have an opportunity to contribute to. My colleague Gill Frigerio and other colleagues did a session, so about 18 months ago now, Gill, that you did.
It's 2 years.
Is it 2 years?
Yeah.
My goodness. So we had a session 2 years ago. We started to explore this as a topic area and starting to just raise some of the issues that we felt have been sort of filtering around the sector for some years. And then I was very fortunate to win some funding at the University of Derby, and very luckily Ifza came to work with us as a PhD student, and she's going to tell you more about her research in a little while. But I think what's important is that this is building a set of conversations and a set of discussions around where we are in terms of the careers workforce. And we know we've got loads of challenges, you know, in and outside of inclusion, in terms of recruitment, retention, and, you know, pay and conditions and all of that. That's not something I think it's helpful for us to get mired in today. I think we've got a very particular topic area that we want to explore. So the programme, I'll start sharing my screen. So I'd just like to welcome everybody, and I can see we've got some international colleagues with us as well, which is absolutely brilliant. I don't know what the time difference is like in Canada at the moment, but there we go. Can you see those slides? Can somebody let me know?
Yeah.
Yep, brilliant. Okay, so sorry, unfortunately I've got the chat box right in the middle of my screen, so I can't see. Not helpful. So overview of the session. I'm here, I'm doing the welcome and introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Gill Frigerio, and who's chair of NICEC, and she's going to take us through some of the key issues as they're perceived in terms of what we want to explore and think about in terms of inclusion. And we're looking at inclusion very, very broadly. And I think it's right and purposeful that we should do that. We've then got other colleagues. So Dr. Emma Bolger is going to talk about gender and class, followed by Ifza Shakoor, who will look at ethnicity and race in terms of the research that she's currently doing. We're then going to have an opportunity to discuss what we've been listening to and our sense of that, followed by probably a well-earned break at that point, and chance to take on some liquids and lose some liquids possibly as well, who knows. And then we got an employer panel, and I'm really thrilled that there was so much interest from colleagues wanting to present and talk and share about the activities they're involved with in their in various careers organisations across the country. So we've got Michelle Jackson, who's the EDI lead for Shaw Trust, Danielle Neal, who's the director of HR for Career Connect, Dr. Nalayani Tambar, who is director of planning, performance and strategic change at the University of Nottingham, but was previously head of the career service there, and Sandra Cowley, who's director of strategy growth and partnerships at Futures for You. And then we will end with some reflections on how we take this forward. So what I'd like to start with very briefly, Michael, are we able to do the poll question that we've set up? While Michael's doing this for us, can I say, please put your comments in the chat. We've got a very, very large group, so it may not be possible for us to have people putting their hands up, but we'll see how we get on. So the poll question we've got is it important that the career development workforce reflects the client group it works with? So you can all see we've got some some responses coming in, mostly at the moment between strongly agree, some neither agree nor disagree, one disagree, a couple more disagree. So I'll leave it. We've got 25 responses and we've got 36 people in the room. I won't respond because I can't work out to do it while I'm doing everything else. So we'll leave my response for now. Okay, any more responses? Okay, so I think it's okay. So at the moment, we have got sort of 89% have participated. We have 56% strongly agree, 32% agree, 4 neither, 8% disagree. So we will, there we go. Let me just share the results with everybody. Or I'm stopped sharing. Michael, are you sharing the results?
Yeah, sorry, I was already sharing and then
Oh,
I
yeah.
stopped sharing.
We haven't coordinated this bit perhaps as well as we might do. Okay, so hopefully you've had an opportunity. It'd be really good if, Michael, if we could record that, because I'd like to come back to those perhaps a little bit later just to look at them again. We won't necessarily do the poll again. So if we can stop sharing at this point, I'm going to hand over to Gill, who will take us through the first session.
Thank you, Siobhan. And I will just we'll just have the obligatory pause for sharing slides. And here we are. And following that poll, it falls to me to do some scene setting for this afternoon for this broad, multifaceted and important topic that we're looking at. And a complex topic. We've seen from the poll, you know, there's a lot of people saying, yes, of course, diversity in relation to the client base is really important, but there's also some nuance in there about how we might position this. So as Siobhan has said, I'm Gill Frigerio, I'm the chair of NICEC. I'm also a member of staff at the University of Warwick, working on our career development programmes. And I've been in the world of career development for 24 years. So it's been an interesting reflection putting this presentation together. So yeah, I'm setting some context. I'm also wanting to focus and talk a bit about NICEC's interest in it and locate the debate a little bit in the current situation. So we know, don't we, that career development work operates at this fascinating interface between the personal, the political, the subjective, the objective. And we know that issues of equality and justice are central to our work. And as a result of that, there are many different angles on equality, diversity and inclusion that in our work that we could be taking in a session like this today. We could be talking about different client groups. We could be talking about how our services engage with different client groups, how practitioners work with them and advocate for them, or how we might research their experiences, their perspectives and their outcomes. Or we could be looking at different sectors. We could be talking about types of employer or types of work, who gets in, who gets on, how do employers create environments where people can feel they belong and can flourish. But today, what we're doing is quite specific, actually. We're focusing and turning the lens on ourselves. We're thinking about the particular labour market that we're in for career development work. And we're considering the critical question of how equal is access to our sector. Some of the observations that I'm making today, well, most of them are UK based. It's interesting to have some of our international colleagues with us, and it will be really interesting in the discussion as we get into some of the detail of this important topic. It'll be interesting to have some international comparisons and to see what we can learn from that too. Now, as I said, 24 years working in this sector, one where I have always felt at home. I think that's for a number of reasons. I've always found the sector quite homogenous, although I'm pleased to say that has been improving. And I think the same can probably be said for NICEC. NICEC's origin story was about a very particular group of colleagues. And over the years, recent years, with changes to our governance, as we've morphed to become a learned society of thought leaders within the career development space, we have sought to become a little more diverse. But I have to say, that's something that we're finding quite challenging, and we're having to think about quite hard. In the career development profession, we haven't done as much as in some related professions to address equality, diversity and inclusion. But I do think that I can see lots of signs that we're getting serious about it now. So, for example, one of the things we'll be focusing on today is the challenges of getting data. And one thing I've noticed in recent years is a recognition from some of the membership bodies within the sector that it's really important to gather this data and worth devoting some resource to. In recent times, there has been some particular research on race, culture and ethnicity. And I want to give a particular shout out to Vida Hiranavaya, who has interviewed UK minority ethnic women in the career development profession for her masters and published on that in the NICEC journal recently. We've also had a team of researchers at Warwick, some of whom are here today actually, looking at the awarding gaps and the experience gaps of trainees in the career development profession. So there is some research and some attention being paid to this. But what I want to highlight today is that, just to start us off, is how difficult these conversations can be, how nuanced they are, and how pervasive the issues are. So that's those are my main points. So firstly, it's difficult to talk about this. I think it's worth acknowledging that we all have our own particular perspectives on this, and it's we're very grateful to the employers that are here today and prepared to speak about these issues. But we've tried really hard to get employers across the breadth of the career development sector. But in some areas, these issues are actually quite commercially sensitive, and it can be difficult sometimes to talk openly. The issues intersect with other ways of slicing up the career development job market, if you like. So, for example, higher education as a set of employers has its own issues with equality, diversity and inclusion, which affect career and employability staff the same way as other professional services. And in the world of private career coaching, I would include that within career development work in the same way that I would include kind of talent management and work in organisational settings as a really important part of our practice. And that has a significant overlap with the coaching world, where there is also some attention being paid to these issues, but it's clear that the coaching world is easier to enter if you've had a background as in a corporate setting, if you have networks, if you have social capital and a financial cushion whilst you establish your own business. So there's some issues then about who gets to access that particular area of work. It's nuanced too. We can compare, as we will today, the inputs that employers are making, but the outputs might differ for all sorts of reasons. It's very hard to evaluate. It's very localised, and in different localities, I'm sure we'll see the issues presenting differently. I mean, it's not just about the legal frameworks, which are based around the protected characteristics, which you can see here, the Equality Act protected characteristics. But also we've got other issues. I mean, class doesn't feature here. We do have disability, but I'd broaden that out and to be thinking about health conditions. Career development practitioners do or should come in all shapes and sizes. So we need to think intersectionally about how we are constituted. So I've said the I word, intersectionality, the term coined nearly 30 years ago now by Kimberly Crenshaw, the legal scholar in the US, who was talking at the time about the particular issues for Black women in the US and how they are structurally disadvantaged as women, as well as people of colour. But the term has been is well used now, and I found this recent quote from Crenshaw, which I thought was a really interesting reminder of what we're talking about here. It's a lens through which we can see power coming into an area and colliding. It's not simply race problems, gender problems, class, LGBTQ, whatever. There's what we need to be with those frameworks that are about those particular identity markers. It raises what happens to people who are subject to many or even all of these things. So the third point I wanted to make was about the pervasiveness of these issues. And really what I mean there is that the issues are relevant right from the theoretical underpinnings of career development work through to the myriad ways in which we might practice career development work. We know that our theoretical base lacks diversity. It doesn't draw much on research from the global south. Theories are often based on data that's been gathered from relatively easy to access and privileged populations. It was only really in 1980 that we started to think about whether we needed different theories to understand the career development of women. Yes, there's been lots of steps forward in thinking about how career development might be affected by these issues of identity. But fundamentally, some of the building blocks of our practice aren't really built on that sort of diverse research base. And having a diverse group of practitioners at every level, amongst our immediate colleagues and within the kind of the scholarly world of career development will be an important part of sensitizing those of us who have who come from the populations that have been researched to the issues that might not be being covered. But we have to make space for those conversations. In my teaching, I talk quite a lot about the systems theory framework of Patton and McMahon and the idea that in a learning alliance with clients, we're bringing all these aspects of our intra and interpersonal identities into the interaction. And so we all need to be thinking about what those mean for the way that we turn up as practitioners. We also know that, perhaps ironically, engaging people in career development conversations can be doubly difficult when those people are aware of disadvantage that they may experience. And there's plenty of evidence, for example, that students in universities from UK minority ethnic backgrounds are more motivated to engage and use the career development service when they can see staff from the same backgrounds on the team there. So NICEC's committed to this issue as an organisation, but we partly because of the problems that we have with our own diversity, don't want to simply lead this conversation and dominate it. We want to diversify the range of voices, and we're seeking to do that. Siobhan mentioned a previous event where we sought to have a lot of invited speakers, but it's a really difficult balance to strike. I do think it is worth noting that we haven't managed to have any men on the platform today, so it's not just a case of the numbers, is it? what I take from this for myself is that where we have privilege, we need to be open to listening to the perspective of our colleagues. So before I hand over, I want to have a quick look at what it is that we do know about the diversity of the career development profession, which of course is a very broad construct. And the answer is not as much as we might. I'm drawing today on some research that's been done by the Institute for Employment Studies. I've referenced a report which you'll be able to look at. Much of the report talks about the difficulty of getting hold of accurate data. There are all sorts of reasons why it's hard to get complete data sets or up-to-date data or complete data, particularly where it's voluntary disclosure. But here's some, and this data is largely drawing from people who would use the Standard Occupational Classification of Careers Advisor, those people are primarily in statutory services. So we're already not necessarily scooping in the people who are working in private practice that I mentioned earlier, for example. But here's some examples. So first of all, the report found in terms of gender that careers advisors working in schools and colleges are predominantly female and tend to work shorter hours. We've got issues around full-time and part-time working there and why that's available. There's more, the proportion of careers advisors that are men is slightly higher in higher education, and that intersects with age, but it's still predominantly female. That intersects with age, which where you tend to get more diversity in the younger age groups. We do also see occupational stratification, where you see different dynamics at different as people's careers progress or don't. There's some suggestion that the workforce has become a little bit younger, but in terms of ethnicity, we've got around on average 1 in 10 careers advisors from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. Now there's much more likely in London and much less likely in other regions. For example, in the Southwest, it's only 1%, in the Northeast, 2%. And in terms of disability, we've got very few careers advisors working in secondary schools reporting a disability, and a slightly higher proportion in technical and education. And I think also in higher education, but there's just some examples. So what I'd like to suggest then, I'll stop sharing my slides now, is that we go into today with open minds, with awareness that we all carry different experiences, and we'll bring our professional skills of listening and our ability to have good, brave conversations and focus on what we can do, see if we can generate some actions. We're going to end with some particular actions for NICEC, for us as individuals, and for the sector as a whole. Because a more diverse career development workforce or profession or sector or whatever we call it can and will lead to greater equality, diversity and inclusion in the job market as a whole. And therefore it's not just good for us, it's good for the working world. Thank you. So hope that sets a suitable context for us. I am going to hand over now. We've got a couple of snapshots for you, as Siobhan suggested, where we've got Emma Bolger from the University of West of Scotland talking about gender and class. And after Emma, we've got Ifza Shakoor from the University of Derby talking about ethnicity and race. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Emma. Thank you.
So without further ado, then we'll move on and I'll introduce what I'm talking about today and a little bit about me. So similar to Jill, I've been working in careers and academic roles and related to the sort of career information advice and guidance, career development sector for a good while now. I think I started about 2004. And most of you who've heard of me recently will know that I'm a senior lecturer and the programme leader at the University of the West of Scotland for the MSc in Career Guidance and Development Programme and various others. Previously, I've worked as well as a gender equality expert for Skills Development Scotland, and I'm telling you this kind of just to give you a sense of, like Jill, I've been around this for a long time, and like many colleagues we've got here today, and we've all got a sense of what's going on around us within the sector, who we work with, and the type of people that we work with, and what, as Jill said, the homogeneous kind of sense that we've got of what people were like working within our sector over time. And we have seen some changes around that over time, but many of us would like to see that shifting a bit more swiftly. So I've very much been interested in equality, diversity and inclusion in career development work more broadly. And what I mentioned briefly now is that within the PhD that I did, that got me to be Dr. Emma Bolger, is that I did look at occupational segregation and the general demographics of people who give career guidance and development as professionals, as people who are employed in the sector, and also more generally, who do people generally go to when they're looking for career advice? And this is something we need to think about a little bit as well. We all know that, you know, we don't have any protected titles at present in relation to career development work, but we also need to be mindful of the fact that people approach quite often for guidance people who look like those of us who are working in the sector. So there are implications here on an informal basis as much as we have for formal delivery of our services. So in my session, we're early on, very much again starting to further set the scene and to get us thinking about what we should be talking about today. I'm probably going to be raising more questions here than any that I will be answering. What we want you to do is to start to step back and think and review who you are, who you work with, and think about the general composition of our sector. What do we look like and who are we working with? I've put a Padlet up. I've set that up, and hopefully that will be helpful to you to refer back to during the group discussions later on. You can contribute to that Padlet anonymously. We're not asking you to log in if you don't feel comfortable doing that, or put your name to any of your comments. Really keen to get kind of your natural gut feelings on these issues that we're talking about. If you open up the Padlet and you scroll over, there's quite a few questions on there. I've set it up kind of one by one. So there are a few spaces, and then at the very end there's a space just for any of your other thoughts. If you're watching the recording of this, I'll leave that open, and if you want to contribute to that afterwards, I'm sure we'll be coming back to that to listen to and review the comments that you've made later on. So, sorry, my slide deck's frozen. Yep. So just again, I want to, most of you are looking at me at this point thinking, as an academic wandering in, telling us how to do our jobs, and we actually all work in the sector. What do we do? What are we doing in relation to this within academia? Well, we encourage our students to constantly review and critique the theory. We're doing that ourselves as academic. We know the theory that underpins our work that requires continuous review. We're critiquing what's out there in relation to gender and class, and the perspectives that we adopt, and the heritage of our theory being very heavily kind of located within as many theoretical areas are in sort of a white kind of European, North American kind of context. And we do, we are very mindful of equality and inclusion, but most of us working in the sector, we aren't sitting within a university, we aren't talking theory all day, and we are working and wanting to make a difference. I currently feel quite kind of, I'm in a sort of a set adrift boat at this point, because a lot of a lot of people know that I'm just started maternity leave. I'm not necessarily linked with my university and anything else that I've been doing for a while, and I'm really grateful to have some headspace to start to think about these issues from a different perspective. And like yourselves, I'm wanting to really see us making a difference on these issues. But these are long-standing issues that we've had. And we need to think about how well we're doing so far in terms of making a difference to the context. So what do we know? What do we know about gender and class within careers practice? As I've said already, we've got quite a limited heritage. We've been around for a while. We know that our roots as a sector are very much within the vocational work that we did, about getting people into jobs. That's where we started from, but where are we now? And I would hope that everyone here today has an awareness of the fact that gender and class, there is underrepresentation within our sector. But talking about that, I think we also need to be mindful of where people are working within our sector. I mentioned briefly about the informality of guidance as well, alongside what we do. CIAG support outside of the sector, mothers and other female family members, as I discovered in the research that I did for my PhD, are often the sources of CIAG within kind of the informal setting, particularly within the family. And also women, people who identify as women, comprise the majority when we think about the formal sources of CIAG, similar to the data Gill's obtained for us here in Scotland, looking across the sector, working within, for example, skills development Scotland. We've got a kind of a 70-30 split, with the 70%, not surprisingly, being women. I'm assuming also that coming to this, you are where we generally are now in our understanding of class, that class is far more nuanced than it has been previously. So we don't have quite such clearly staged different kind of understandings of class as a kind of almost a set of stairs going upwards. We have now far more changing notions of what we mean by the context of class. Traditionally focused perhaps on income, but now looking at educational background, your actual occupation at any one time, your heritage as a person, and that could take in so many different things. Your health generally, and things that we would use to indicate people's general level of deprivation comes into all of this in a very kind of big melting pot compared to what we might have traditionally understood to be class. And the language that we are really using now to describe this concept, particularly in how we think about how we work, is probably more rooted in the concepts of privilege and disadvantage than necessarily directly in relation to this term of class. And we're seeing, particularly over the last few years, a very rapidly changing world around us. We've had, the whole experience of the pandemic has perhaps changed what we think about in terms of class and structure. And we've also got, we're looking at the current climate, and we're seeing the cost of living crisis. The fact that we are all kind of living in a perma crisis at the moment is having a rapid change, causing a rapid change in relation to what we view of this. So I'm also keen to kind of get you thinking today as well about who we look at as role models. Who maybe were you given as a role model when you first started to work in the careers workplace, and why might they have been chosen? Who were they? Were they picked because they were like you, for example? And coming back to this kind of general understanding of what our sector looks like, there likely is a tipping point, a critical mass where people don't realise that there is maybe a gender imbalance within the role or sector that they're working in, or a class-related balance. But we need to start thinking in a bit more detail about how much we're accepting of that within the sector. I'm sure that many of you have been through many layers of unconscious bias training at this stage and have engaged with it, but without, we talk about it a lot in relation to the work that we do with our clients and the practice that we conduct. But let's look around us a bit more, and are we really as unaware as we claim to be of how these issues present in our own sector? So on that note, we have to accept that there's an issue, and quantifying this is really challenging. This is a really sensitive topic, and there is ultimately, as we look around, and most of us have got our cameras off here today, which is perhaps helpful, because we would be looking at, as we know, generally a sea of white faces of people who are working within the career sector. And we also need to come back to this sense of privilege. What has enabled us to get to be in the roles that we're in today? But we've got a lot of conflict, and it's not unfair for you to be sitting here, particularly, mostly women here, mostly women on the panel speaking today. We're working in well-paid roles. We're generally in what would be described as decent or fair work. And compared to the working roles, terms and conditions experienced by many, many women in the workplace, we're doing all right. And that's a challenge, because our gut instinct might be to try and protect the position that we're in. It may well be to want to kind of bring up the drawbridge and say, actually, we don't want more men in our sector. This is a good opportunity for women. And resort to the kind of language and the kind of perspectives that are very, very common in relation to discrimination within the workplace. And is it reasonable for us to think like that? This is a perfectly justifiable position, given what we know of women's experience within the labour market, and the experience of women that we're quite often working with one-to-one and seeing come up against very challenging circumstances. There are things like, the cost of entry routes to training, to perhaps at postgraduate level or other training, and to be able to access the roles that are available within the sector. But for others, the student funding that's available is a really good option. The flexibility of training to enter this section actually makes us a far more viable and easier route to a decent and fair role that many other opportunities don't offer. But again, within that mix, we need to think about, well, the adult returners who are perhaps coming to us at that point have already experienced some privilege in their life, because they're likely coming to us with suitable existing work history and qualifications prior to maybe taking a break for caring commitments or having children, for example. So we've got a lot going on. It's not so easy for us to simply say, let's take a bit of positive action and change things for the good. There's a lot going on in there that we need to unpick and think about the general wider levers behind what we're talking about. We need to be starting to think a little bit about dissecting really who we are and how those things interact. Traditionally, where were we? Where are we coming from? And I know from experience I've had, and certainly within the wider sector, I wouldn't say this is in any way as prevalent as previously, but there has been a sense of careers professionals being an expert and helping, having a good professional role and helping the hoi polloi to better themselves in the world. That's where vocational guidance first starts to really emerge. When we're thinking about, I've got, how do you get a job? You've got a job. I'll bestow some of my wonderful knowledge as to how you might also get a job and be as stable a position as me. So we've got the privilege of being in really generally quite well-paid roles and well-respected roles. So thinking about your clients, who do they see when they come in to see you? Do they look up to you as a professional? Do they see you as a professional? Or is there something about your role and its very nature and position of your role that might make some of your clients feel alienated by what you do? And what's the impact of that? Now, this is something else I really want us to start to think about, is in relation to class and privilege and background, how is that split within the CIAG roles that we have? So is there a difference? We come in, we might have the same qualification, But what is the difference on a subtle level between the people who are working perhaps in employability, key worker roles, frontline, a kind of nuts and bolts, getting stuck in with the day-to-day of supporting people who are perhaps further from the labour market, compared to those of us who are working, for example, in higher education careers roles, where we've got luxuries of time and resource to work with people. I'd say that the most popular blog post I've ever put on my website is about, you know, how do people view us from the outside, and very much does, you know, it's a light-hearted view, but there's some subtle kind of undertones that I think we need to think about as to how people view us from the outside. What do people see us as career professionals? Because that's what we really need to engage with. And it is hard to do that, not least because we get quite a hammering from every angle at every opportunity. If it's not the school's fault or the parents' fault, it's certainly the career advisor's fault, and that's something that we've all experienced at some stage in our career. And we certainly see that. We see that in every you know, successful celebrity you know, autobiography. There's always a career advisor mentioned at some point who told them, no, you don't want to do that, you need something to fall back on. Lovely, makes for a great hook for every story. So it's our fault ultimately on top of everybody else. We have some, you know, some small pockets of positive action. I'm going to talk about that in a minute in the next slide. But I think we need to start to be making some slightly tougher decisions ourselves. We need to step back from work that's being offered to us sometimes, in relation to people like myself who are working with that in academia. I've been approached to take on certain gigs from time to time, and you know what, I'd like the cash, I'd like the exposure and all the rest of it, but sometimes you have to take a really clear moral and ethical judgment on these things and think, is there a better voice or a lesser heard voice that I should be promoting instead of myself here? And that's not always easy to do, but it's something that I think we need to think about doing a bit more. Thinking about yourselves in the workplace, how do you conduct yourselves in terms of the information you share with colleagues? Also, we talked a little bit about performative behaviour, but are you kind of hiding any information about yourself, particularly around your background and class and so on? Or is there anything that you're kind of, you know, trying to make more of? Is it, you know, and this could be, you know, I'm going to pull an example out of the sky here, but, you know, is there kind of competitiveness about where you might be going on your holidays each year? What's that joke about someone's going to Tenerife and someone's going to 11 Tenerife, right? That kind of thing. Have we got that happening? And what does that say about the general environment you're working in relation to class? For most of us, we're mindful of this, but we've got the two extremes here, and we need to be careful about how we're engaging with that, and it can be very, very subtle. We are all generally now in this position where we are far better at subdividing our kind of personal and professional identities. And you may be someone who's really, really good at that. And, you know, 5 o'clock, end of the work day, 5 o'clock's the end of your work day, you're doing well and you are in a decent and fair mode of employment, I would say at this point, if you're doing a nice 9 to 5. But are you able to switch off? Or are you someone who's having to change their identity slightly when they're working with different types of clients? And are you mindful and aware of that? And are you actually able to describe how you do that? I've talked slightly there about performative behaviour. There are other things that I think we could really kind of take a moment to refocus on in terms of performative behaviour that we're conducting, to make ourselves perhaps seem, you know, making a lot of what we're doing without actually making much of a difference. Activism and allyship, kind of trying to convey that we're doing quite a lot, but a lot of it, and this is a lot of you know, who are working in major organisations, if you're producing diversity reports, you've all seen these small pieces, the anecdotal kind of stories that you think, you know what, that was 5 minutes work, but it seems to have taken up 3 pages in my organisation's end of year diversity review, making much of things that are quite small and making very little difference. Conducting ourselves in the workplace in a way that is visible but also perhaps we're doing them simply to tick boxes and you know, make our audience aware of them. Similarly, we've got some communities of practice, some good communities of practice, but are we seeing any of these issues come into life there as well? And rather than challenging them, sitting back and feeling still a little bit awkward about talking about them. Here's a few examples of things that we've talked about in recent years in similar events to this. We talked about the kind of positive action we might be doing around recruitment and retention within the sector. So we have maybe thought about the language we use within material and vacancy advertisements, being very clear and saying, you know, within our sector where people are underrepresented by gender, by race, by ethnicity, by, you know, all these things. We're putting it in the promotional material we're using. We're maybe targeting underrepresented groups, and we've got some professional networks set up there within some of our workplaces. Are these things making a difference? And for what difference they are making, is it fast enough? Or is this still within this performative behaviours angle? I've put it on my vacancies, I've done a bit of marketing work, and I've got a network set up, done, right? And why can't I understand why people aren't flocking through my doors and staying forever? So we've got these easy tick box things that we say, I've done a bit, but what are we doing beyond the basics on the long-standing issues that we've got? So as I said at the start, I'm here to get everyone thinking, not necessarily expecting you to have any answers at the end of any of that, and hopefully things are starting to tick over. If you want to find anything into the chat box, or let's say there's a Padlet there, I'm happy to kind of have a few minutes, but I'm aware we want to try and make up a wee bit of time because we're a few minutes late getting started. I can see some things have come through on the chat already, but I can't see that box yet. I just wanted to flag to you as well, Pete Robertson, who is definitely here today, and I'd put this in before I knew you were coming, Pete, so this isn't me doing any performative actions, just simply to cheer up people who are in the audience today here. And Pete's one of the NICEC fellows as well, wrote a very good recent blog post on the Career Guidance for Social Justice site around ethical issues in relation to occupational choice, and I think this also has a lot of impact and relationship between, and Pete subtly talks in that article about the client advisor relationship in relation to this topic. So I'll leave that one with you as well. I'm going to stop sharing just now so I can see what's coming up in the chat. But oh god, there's a lot coming up. Quite a bit come up in the chat there. I don't think I'll go through that in detail at this point, Siobhan. I think I'll fire over to you so Ifza can get started on her slot.
Thanks, Emma. Absolutely brilliant. So if we can hand over to Ifza, and please do continue to put stuff in the chat. Once we've had Ifza's presentation, we'll then have some chance for discussion. And I'm conscious that we've been talking to you a lot, but it'll be good to hear your thoughts as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Ifza, and I'm a PhD student at NICEC, and Professor Neary is actually my Director of Studies. So I'm looking at equity, diversity and inclusion, career development, diversifying the pipeline. And similarly to Emma, I have got a Padlet, so if anyone wants to put up any anonymous comments there, you're more than welcome to. It's just to get you thinking. Okay. So a little bit of biography about me. So I became a teacher. I qualified as a primary teacher, and I realised actually what I was doing, I wasn't doing as much of the people side of the human side of things that I wanted to in making a difference in people's lives. And a lot of the things that I was doing were more for the sake of tick boxes and Ofsted and so on. So I left teaching quite heartbroken actually, because it wasn't what I was thinking teaching would be like. So I went to sales and marketing, had my third child in June 2019, and I started working in September. So I went back to sales and marketing, having left teaching, and then I found a job as a senior careers coordinator. And I kept thinking, what is this? It sounds fascinating, but I didn't quite get it. At the same time, I got a job working in a department for work and pensions as an employability advisor, oddly enough, what are the odds? But I didn't accept it because there's no parking there, and I had a young child who was 6 months old. So I accepted a job as a career-related learning coordinator, and then I got promoted to a senior coordinator, and this meant that I was on the on the ground, working with schools in Derby, in deprived areas, connecting them to the world of work, working with people from the employability side, with different organisations, taking them into schools, showing pupils that these are jobs that are available in the future, and connecting school subjects with the world of work. So that opened up my eyes to something completely new, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm actually making a difference to young people's lives, because I could see almost that light bulb moment. And I was doing my master's in education part-time at this point. And what I noticed was a pattern of schools taking out their pupils with special educational needs, or behaviour issues, or autism, or anything that was quite obvious, and often taking them out of the sessions, and because they've reflected badly on their schools, or so they thought. And I'd always question it and say, why are you doing this for? These pupils need it more. So that's what I focused my master's dissertation on, and I got a distinction in that, and I found this opportunity as a PhD, for PhD studentship at NICEC. It's quite similar, so I mentioned my dissertation because it's quite similar to what I'm doing now. So now I'm looking at equity and diversity in the career development field, and diversifying the pipeline. So I've been doing that since September 2021, and I'm hoping to finish in about a year and a half, quite scary actually, in September 2024. And last year in June 2022, David's timing is quite well actually, I secured a job as an EDI associate for the CDI. So this is the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Associate. I feel like this position has really cemented my PhD, because the theoretical side and the learning side has been complemented perfectly by the fact that I'm working with the workforce, having one-to-ones, setting up monthly chats, working with David Morgan and the CDI and the and all these other organisations, working with all 4 nations. And my approach has been quite transformative. So that's why I put over here, I believe in ethical transformative research aimed at creating and driving forward change to challenge social injustice and create equity for all. Now that bit for all is emphasised, because I don't believe, well, what I do believe is that we've got an amazing workforce, but we have got pockets of gaps in it which do need addressing, and this workforce is massive. There's space for everyone, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, whatever your background is, there's space for people in this workforce. So that's something I really want to emphasize. Nobody's being replaced, nobody's being kicked out of the sector. It's massive, and it's we just need to address those gaps in it. And that transformative approach drives forward all of my work. So this is a little bit of a plug. On the 26th and 27th for the CDI, we have got it's almost like a conference, but it's not. It's more an informative session where we ask people to discuss, the workforce and the public to discuss and look at different aspects of diversity, which will all go forward in putting together the CDI Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Strategy. Okay, so the learning outcomes. By the end of the session, you'll be able to form an understanding of the current workforce demographics. There's a hint, it's been covered and we don't actually properly know who they are because there's no solid data, by Gill and Emma. Identify why equity and diversity are needed, and identify some of the longer term implications of a non-diverse workforce. So if you want to have a look at my Padlet, there are some questions there for you to begin thinking about and pondering over. And if you'd like to leave some comments, please do feel free to do so. The slides will be available after the session, and all references will be given at the end. Okay, overview. I've done the introduction, a brief whistle-stop tour of where we are currently is coming up, and I'll be looking at all of these sections. So change, who here? So a quick yes or no in comments, or take your mic off. Who here is quite comfortable with change? Is it something that you're quite comfortable with, or is it something that can be a little bit daunting, a little bit scary? So the question is, are you comfortable with change? Like, I know for me, I'm probably on the fence. It depends what type of change. And sometimes I'm quite excited if it's something fun, but if it's the unknown, it is a little bit scary for me. So I'm just opening up chat. takes a little adjustment. It definitely depends on the nature. Yes, comfortable with change. Okay with change, but can be difficult at times. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, lovely. Okay, so this phrase, you can't be what you can't see. I'm guessing that the majority of us have heard this phrase. However, often it's taken away from the person who actually said it. Now, this is a lady who's an American lady, Marion Wright Edelman, and she said it. And what I want everyone to do from now on is, whenever you use the phrase, you can't be what you can't see, quote it to Marion, because it's about social justice. She's a Black lady in America, and she put together this really famous phrase, and she said it, but often her name, I've hardly ever seen her name attributed to the quote. So I just think it's so important in terms of relatability and representation, social justice, equity, to make sure that we attribute it to her. Okay, current situation. At the moment, we don't have a full picture of the career development sector. However, from existing research and the little demographic data that we do have, we are aware that there is a diversity issue within the workforce. So the existing workforce is ageing, largely female, middle class and white. David Morgan and I have been trying to piece together the 4 nations demographic data, but it's been really difficult. We are currently working on it, as I know a lot of other organisations are, but often the answers we get are, we're checking with HR, but we never actually hear back, or we don't know how much data we can share. So there's a lot of hoops that we have to jump through, but we are hoping, we are determined, and we are hoping to be able to piece together different pieces of jigsaw puzzles and hopefully share a better picture of who the workforce, of what the workforce actually looks like. But yeah, there's been challenges. The existing workforce, so if it is aging, largely female, middle class and white, from what we do know, it's not, is it, well, my question is this representative of society? We live in a globalized world, we live in a multicultural society. There are pockets of England that are more diverse, and as Gill said, it is quite nuanced. It is dependent on where you live. So if you look around, like for example, I'm at the University of Derby, it is quite diverse, whereas another university that might be 10 miles from here may not be as diverse. So diversity is dependent on where you are and what society and what aspect of society you're looking at. But in terms of career development workforce, who work with all aspects and all people in society, from secondary schools to FE to the third sector to HE, you've got to think, are the workforce representative? And the answer to that is it depends on where you're looking at. Like HE is more diverse than secondary schools, for example. And in such a people-orientated role, what are the benefits of a more diverse pipeline? And why is a diverse workforce needed? Now, these are all questions that I want you to hold in your head and think as I go through the slide deck. Okay, some of the issues are in England, and this is only in England because I know that other nations don't really have this issue. There is quite low pay. It's not the best paid sector, especially in secondary, FE or the third sector. HE is better paid. It's often not seen as a professional career. Career practitioners are seen as the poor cousins of social workers and teachers. And there's a bit of a stereotype about little old ladies sat there in cardigans giving careers advice, which isn't a very professional image. There's a lack of demographical data. There's a retainment issue. How are practitioners getting in, and are they getting on? What are the CPD opportunities? Where do they go to next? Are they leaving the sector? These are all things that we would all be looking at. And this session is more a session to get people thinking rather than me giving answers. Progression, are people progressing and staying, or are they leaving the careers field? The traditional level 7 route, now that's probably the most popular route for people to come into the sector, and it attracts the same type of candidates, which are often middle class candidates who've been to university and now doing the masters. The apprenticeship route is still quite new. It's got a relatively low intake. And from conversations in my role as an EDI associate, I've spoken to people who have said, X, Y, and Z person has done the level 6, or they've done the apprenticeship, we've done the level 7, we're paid the same. what's the point in doing a level 7 if we're paid the same as a level 6? So there are slight tensions between the different routes and the ways that people have come in. The microaggressions and biases, we all know what unconscious bias is, but are people talking about the actual biases, the culture, the way that people portray themselves, the people that are in power, who's doing the talking, who's doing the research? Gill mentioned the theories. Are the theories relative to everyone? Are they relevant to a multicultural society? Are they current? Are you updating your practice? Are you looking at the global south? And who are the academics teaching? So the actual academics in the 6, there's 8, including Scotland, there's 8 universities that provide the masters, 8 or 9, yeah, that provide the masters in career development. So who are the academics actually teaching? Are they representative of society? And are they diverse? So why am I looking into this particular area? One, I got funding and Siobhan did set out the scope of this study. However, I decided myself to particularly focus on minority ethnic groups and ethnic minorities in career development. Social justice, there's a need for a diverse workforce to represent a multicultural society. So what I'm doing is a transformative, the method that I've selected is quite transformative, it's quite critical. So it's actually called critical qualitative inquiry, because I'm looking at things through a social justice lens, and I'm addressing my own biases, my own power as a researcher, and also trying to distribute that power to the participants. Why is diversity needed, and what are the challenges and positive enablers to diversification? This is something that I'm looking at within my thesis. So, as I've spoken about, at the moment, the current demographics within the career development sector have been noted as a concern. It typically draws a female workforce, generally white, middle-aged and older, possibly because they are career changers, searching for meaningful employment that corresponds with their beliefs and their ethics. There's a lack of diversity where visibility and relatability for young people of minority ethnic heritage may have an influence on the career prospects available to them. So as Gill mentioned, it's not just about having a meeting and getting advice, information, advice or guidance. It's about the longer term impacts, about the labour workforce, who goes into what job, and it's about social mobility as well, because if you get a more diverse workforce within careers, hopefully then people can, social mobility can also be addressed in certain ways. And in cases where minority ethnic practitioners are already working in the field, a recent small-scale study by Ranavea, and this is Vadehi Ranavea, who Gill mentioned, has highlighted potential retention issues, indicating the need for additional research into why recruitment, promotion and retention may be hindered by the barriers that are structural and systemic. Okay, a diverse workforce can change the outlook for marginalised clients, and this in relation to representation and relatability. It can bring in cultural understanding, new talents and skills, support the social mobility agenda, and diversify the pipeline of not just this workforce, but other workforces as well, with that knock-on effect that I mentioned. So I've chosen to use a transformative methodology paradigm by Donna Mertens. And she has identified 3 transformational characteristics which bear significant ethical implications for the methodological choices, which are summarised in the following section, to ensure that marginalised voices are heard equitably. So it's not about giving people a voice, it's about the fact that you know that everyone has a voice, but it's about giving them a platform. So addressing power, and I recognise that I'm in a position of power as a PhD student, as a researcher, as an equity, diversity and inclusion associate. The positions of power that I've got, I must look at myself and see how I'm involved within this sector and how I can support other people and be an ally, be an activist, and also try and lift people that may not be otherwise be able to have that platform. To also look at the power between other people and society in the design, implementation, evaluation of study. So Gill mentioned something about where we have privilege, we need to be open to listening to our colleagues. I absolutely agree. I think it's so important to identify your own, not only just your biases and your beliefs, but also your power, and to look at those that are not used to. So what I'm trying to say is to do research with those that are underrepresented and that may be harder to access. And for me, because I've got a nuanced approach coming from a British third generation Pakistani background, I've chosen to do my study in 3 different ways. The first one was a questionnaire, which many of you may have seen on LinkedIn because I've shared it enough times, and Twitter. It's now closed. That was phase 1 of my research, where I did a questionnaire aimed at those that have recently entered the workforce in the last 3 years, to look at to get a general overview and a feel of who's come into the sector. And the positive news is that it is getting more diverse, although it's not where we want it to be yet. It's still female heavy. And then the second phase was, out of those participants that participated in the questionnaire for phase 2, to have a focus group, a research circle, where we talk about the issues and the themes that phase 1 of the questionnaire has shown to be evident, and to discuss those themes. And then the third phase of my research is to take these themes to people who have been in the sector for 10 or more years and are also minority ethnic, and to discuss the themes once again, to really get to the heart of the issues and to get to the crux of what's going on and make recommendations for policy going forward. So Merton says that a framework should be developed to link research findings to social action. And my research is all about social action, because the whole point of it is, it's not just going to be a PhD study. Hopefully it will bring forward change, and it will be able to get to that deeper analysis of what the issues are, and hopefully change the way things are for the future workforce and the current workforce. So Merton says that the most disadvantaged and marginalised individuals should be at the centre of action plans that they may alter their own lives. So it's about that power, again, realising that you as a researcher doesn't just have the power, but giving that power and sharing that power with those that are the people that are being researched. So I'm looking at it through a decolonisation lens, and I've mentioned bits of this, reflect on my own biases, positionality, and how my identity and beliefs may impact the research, being critical and reflexive throughout by keeping a research diary, by keeping a blog. And because my journey is quite unique in the fact that I'm working with the professional body at the CDI at the same time as doing my PhD, I think that blog has been quite useful, because then I can look at it later and see, oh, so this is why I chose to do whatever I've chosen to do, and it just makes a bit more sense. I'm exploring an area that is meaningful to me because I have that nuanced approach as a 3rd generation British Pakistani female. I'm using decolonising methodologies and paradigms. I'm looking at theories. I'm looking at evaluating theories. I'm examining power dynamics. It's transformative and collaborative. I'm working with the community via the questionnaire to go and gain that overall consensus, then doing the focus groups with the 2 groups that I mentioned, those that have been recently qualified and those that are more experienced with 10 or more years work experience and who are also minority ethnic. I'm asking myself who the research benefits, and to me this is the incoming career workforce, and also generally the future workforce and the future labour market. The overall aim of my research is to make recommendations for policy and future practice that hopefully put these into place, or support in putting these into place. Now, intersectionality, Jill mentioned this. It's about looking at a person through their different lenses and all the different aspects of their identity, and seeing that everyone has multiple complex and interconnected layers of identity, but also discrimination, social exclusion or disadvantage. We are multi-layered beings. Nobody fits into a single box by itself. And there's no one size fits all model, because everything has to be unique to each person. So even if you've got a group of Asian people, their experience is going to be completely different from the person sat next to them, because of who they are, what the family dynamics are, the way that they were brought up, their abilities, just everything about them, the different intersections and lived experience is unique to each individual. Now, if you think back to your own family and who you are as a person, you compare yourself to your sibling or to your cousin, think about how different your lives are. Even though you may have been brought up in the same home, you've experienced different things that have allowed you to go on different paths within your lives. And that's exactly the same as with intersectionality. No two people are the same and no two groups are the same. So even if people are categorized as being in the same group, it's about recognizing that everyone comes with their own uniqueness. And then the final part of this is the theoretical framework that I'm using. So I'm using the 5 Faces of Oppression, and this is by Iris Marion Young. And there's 5 angles almost to it, or 5 faces, as she says. The first one is marginalization, non-inclusion within the sector. Why is the sector homogenous, and why is it taken so long for this to be picked up on? So why did it take for the NICEC conference 2 years ago for action to begin actually taking place? And one of my questions is, why now? So I understand that the world has changed since COVID, and that there is now a increased focus on diversity and equity, but I'd like to find out why now. So I haven't got the answer to this. It's just something that I'm thinking about. Exploitation, using capitalism and neoliberalism to oppress. Are we in a system that exploits power and perpetuates class differences between the rich, richer, poor and poorer? Class is quite a difficult concept because it's changing forever, but you've got to think about exploitation. Who's being exploited, who benefits from all of this? Powerlessness. Do marginalized groups feel represented, and can they make decisions of power? Who are the dominant people making decisions? Who are the people saying that this is the way it must be done? These people are underrepresented. Is it the people? Is it those that are in power? A question to think about. Cultural imperialism, elevating the dominant culture of a society while othering other cultures and not accepting them as the norm. Is the culture within career development inclusive? Do we have a dominant culture? I don't know the answer to this. It's just something that bears thinking about. Violence. So this isn't violence where it's physical, it's more symbolic violence in terms of exclusion, microaggressions, biases, racism, social injustice, to retain that group domination. For example, why is whatever X group of people being treated special or differently to us? I had a hospital appointment not long ago, and this is just a little anecdote, and the nurse was saying to me, she was talking about LGBTQ people, and she said to me, what I don't understand is, if they want to be included in society within the nursing sector, why do we have special days? And I said to her, you don't understand. And my answer was, you haven't walked a day in that group's shoes, or a person of that group's shoes. And the reason why is because of power. The majority often have power and the minority often don't have power. So these days are to raise awareness. It's not to make them feel different in any way or to exclude them. It's more to create inclusion and to change the way that people think. So it's about putting yourself in the shoes of other people and thinking, okay, so why is this happening? And try and think differently, think a bit more wider, and take yourself out almost into what can feel uncomfortable and step away from the norms. And it's not about creating equality, because I don't know if equality will ever exist, but equity, making it equitable for all people. So I've spoken about the phases of my research.
Sorry, Ifza, can I interrupt you? I'm really
Yes.
sorry, but we are running rapidly out of time.
I'm wrapping up now. I'm 30 seconds.
Okay, thanks, Ifza.
Okay, right, contact details. Thanks, Siobhan. So if anyone would like to contact me, these are I've got my LinkedIn. My name's quite unusual, so I'm quite easy to find, and my email addresses. Thank you so much, and apologies I haven't been able to look at the chat yet.
What we're going to do is we are going to we're going to go into groups. We've probably got about 10 minutes. And I'd just be interested, we're split into about 6 groups, and I would like each group to have a look at the question we set earlier. So if you remember, for those of you who are in, we had the poll question. It is important that the career development workforce reflects the client groups it works with. Discuss. So you might want to take on board some of the thoughts from our various presenters, whether your view is still the same as it was when we did the poll about an hour and 20 minutes ago. Brilliant. Welcome back. Hopefully you've had time to grab a quick drink and whatever else you chose to do in the 10 minutes that you've got for a comfort break. I'm sure many people just quickly trying to scroll through emails and stuff in case there's anything that's bad panicking. Anyway, thank you so much to our speakers before the break for setting the scene and starting to present some of the discussions and the narratives that we need to consider when we're thinking about, you know, the issues around diversity and inclusion within the career development sector. I'm really pleased that we've been able to attract a number of employers to talk to us and share with us their experiences in terms of what they perceive as the challenges from their perspective, and what sort of strategies, approaches that they've been adopting to address those issues. So we've got 4 speakers with us. So I'll mention the speakers and then I'll invite the first one to present. So we've got Michelle Jackson, who's the EDI lead for the Shaw Trust. We've got Danielle Neal. I don't know if I've said your name right, Danielle. I have. I wasn't sure. I should have checked. Danielle is Director of HR at Career Connect. We've got Dr. Nalayani, sorry Nalayani, I'm tripping over your name, Nalayani Tambar, who is now Director of Planning, Performance and Strategic Change, but was previously Head of the Careers Service at the University of Nottingham. And also from the East Midlands, Sandra Cowley, who is Director of Strategy, Growth and Partnership for Futures for You. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for your time and your support with this. So I'll hand over to Michelle. You've each got approximately 10 minutes and then we'll have some time for discussion. So we've got your slides, Michelle. We can't hear you. I don't know if we've lost the audio again, Michelle.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, brilliant. I'm
Sorry,
so thrilled.
I'm using about 6 devices currently.
Thank you, thank you. You're currently on. We can see all of the slides. So if you want to just put it onto slideshow, that would be brilliant.
Okay,
thank
perfect.
you.
I can't actually see them, so that's fine. Can you see them now?
Yep, that's great. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so afternoon everybody. My name's Michelle Jackson. I'm Head of Diversity Inclusion at Shaw Trust, and so I'm going to give you a whistle-stop 5-minute tour of our approach to diversity inclusion at Shaw Trust. So for those of you, I'm not moving now. These things are sent to try us. Now the slide's not moving, I'm afraid.
It does feel like that today, doesn't it?
It really does.
Do you want to, I would say, do you want to unshare and then share again? Or I can see if I could share your slides for you.
Right, let's try again. Oh, goodness me. Let me know when you can see them, because I can't see
We can
them.
see, yeah, we can see them. So if you just go on to slideshow. Okay, let's see if they move this time.
They're not moving. It might be,
No.
I think you've got them. It might be easy if you,
Okay,
It's
if
not
you
letting me
want to
move
start
them.
talking, and I'll try and locate the slides
find
for
them. Yes.
if you can stop.
Shore Trust,
Yeah.
Shore Trust is a charity, and we work with over 3,000 colleagues, about 1,000 volunteers, and we support a diverse range of participants from child to career. So that's the kind of breadth of what we do. We operate nationwide, and we have contracts in justice, children's services, health and wellbeing, learning and skills, and employability. No, it's paused here and it won't. Oh, there we go. Right, so our view of the key requirements for creating a diverse, inclusive organisation. I think intent is so important. This doesn't happen by accident. A lot of the research that's been shared already shows you that. So you need to have the intention to create a diverse, inclusive workforce at all levels, but also to be intentional about it. You need commitment from senior leaders and CEO, because you need that support and you need that leverage. You also need commitment to take positive action, because as I said, doing what you've always done is not going to work. You need to have a proactive approach to it. And the point that's been made earlier on, data is absolutely key. Now, we're really lucky in Shore Trust in that we have within our strategic directive, which is the 10-year plan of the kind of focus of the organisation, these statements within it. So there's a real commitment to having a diverse and representative workforce. There's an understanding that there are barriers, and there's a commitment to remove those barriers. Positive action, which is the thing that many organisations are frightened of, we're not. We've made a commitment to take that positive action when we need to, and around creating safe spaces. So enable our colleagues to feel that they belong, to have those safe spaces to be with like-minded people. So what's in plan? You can have intent, but it's very difficult to ensure that your intent leads to something positive if you don't have a plan. So we actually have a 5-year diversity inclusion plan. We have an inclusive recruitment strategy in terms of recruiting people into the business. We have mandatory and advanced face-to-face and e-learning sessions. So we've set our stall at the beginning of the employment process. We say, this is who we are, this is what we believe in, and you need to sign up for it. We're very values driven. We have a diversity inclusion intranet page. All the information that anyone needs is in one place, so don't have to go searching for it. We have a corporate diversity calendar where we celebrate and mark special events that relate to our client groups and also our colleagues as well. We have a comprehensive development programme. We want to create an inclusive, diverse pipeline for the most senior roles within the organisation. And again, in terms of those safe spaces, we have 8 staff network groups. What we do is we embed diversity inclusion in all our corporate processes, so not just recruitment selection, but in terms of our due diligence, in our contract mobilisation, so it does become business as usual. Now, as we mentioned, data is so powerful. And what data allows you to do is identify where your weak spots are. We're able to monitor the whole employee life cycle, and that means we can target resources where they're actually needed. So we're able to review attraction, recruitment, progression, engagement, disciplinaries, exit by different demographics, so we can identify where there are inequities within the business. We monitor appraisal scores and we moderate them, because obviously that's the the means for which people are able to progress within the organisation. So again, we've got our eyes and ears open to identify any inequities. We undertake gender pay gap reporting like most organisations, but we also extend beyond that and look at ethnicity and disability pay gap reporting. We undertake analysis of the demographics of the organisation at every level. So again, we can identify where there are issues that we really need to focus on and bear down on. And we monitor the engagement level in all of our development opportunities. There's no point having these mechanisms to give people the skills and experience to progress if we aren't getting groups who are underrepresented within them. Because we do have great data on our sort of the makeup of organisation, the demographics, what we do is cut the data for participation in all of our key development opportunities. We can identify by gender, disability and ethnic origin, who's taking part, and then take that positive action to encourage people to participate if they're not. Without this particular area, we're not able to create that diverse pipeline that's essential to have our goal of having diversity at every level of the organisation. In terms of achievements, the kind of so what, if you like, we are a disability confident leader. We've achieved the National Equality Standard last year. And in fact, we also achieved Best Diversity Inclusion Initiative at last year's CIPD People Management Awards. So although we feel that we're doing a good job internally, we want that external recognition of the work that we're doing and to identify any areas that perhaps we need to bear down a bit more. So that's a whistle-stop tour. I know there are going to be questions a bit later on. I don't know if there's anything that people would like me to answer now, or whether we leave that until the end.
I think we've probably got a minute or two if there are some burning questions, if anybody's got. I can't necessarily see everybody's hands, so let me have a look at this moment. There's, oh, lovely, Catherine.
Hi.
You've got a question for us.
Thank you, Siobhan. I'm particularly interested in the inclusive recruitment strategy that Michelle mentioned. I thought it was fascinating what you said, Michelle, really useful to see it from your point of view. But the particular gap that I've got is understanding how an inclusive recruitment strategy can look.
Yeah, so that's key really, and it's broader than just recruitment. It's, as we know, millennials and the young generation are very values driven. So it's not just about what you do when you're recruiting, it's what your social profile is generally, the things you comment on as an organisation, the stance you take, the fact that you share that you are celebrating diversity events and so on. So what we look at is the language we use. Is it very gender biased? What we recognise actually is that our language is very gendered towards females, and we're not recruiting as many male because we're not using language that research has shown appeal to men. So we look at language, we look at where we advertise, we look at the imagery we use, we look at the statements. Do we promote our staff networks? Do we have comms from our staff networks saying that they belong? So it's not just a specific, we need these X number of vacancies, this is what we're going to do. It's who are we as a business, and are we communicating that effectively in our business as usual, not just when we're trying to recruit somebody.
Thank you. We've got one question on the chat, and then Michelle's got a hand up, and then we will move on to the second speaker and we'll pick up any further questions afterwards. So, Michelle, can you explain more about the shadow board? That sounds really, people think that sounds really interesting.
It is really interesting, actually. So the chief exec, we're aware of gatekeeping within industries and particular managers who like to keep control of the narrative. So what our chief exec has done is he has a board made up of people who aren't in leadership roles. So he goes out to our staff networks, to our employee voice, to like our kind of employee council, and generally puts the word out that he wants a board, and he will spend quite a lot of his time talking about the issues that our actual board is dealing with. And it gives those people exposure, it gives them access to conversations, give them access to chair meetings, preparing papers and so on. So it's a real commitment on the part of the chief exec, and actually there have been loads of progression opportunities that have come out of people being on the board. So it's democratising the information and the kind of power that's within the organisation.
That sounds really interesting. I think we could have a whole session on that alone, couldn't we? Michelle, you've got your hand up. I do know there's a couple more in the chat, but as I said, I'll pick those up a little bit later. Michelle.
Thank you. I just wondered whether the introduction of the career development professional hire apprenticeship, in addition to entry to qualification through the OCR level 6 and the QCD or a master's programme, whether the apprenticeship has enabled you or supported your diversity.
Interestingly enough, we have, because I'm part of a skills shortage, because as we know it's difficult to recruit people in this industry, so we have a higher than national proportion of our internal colleagues undertaking apprenticeships. And in fact, one of the things we recognised was a gap between interest and the kind of skills level needed to get a job. So we actually put in place a kind of an intensive skills programme, and we went out to recruit underrepresented groups. So the black men in London were quite difficult to attract, and almost gave them an intensive 2-week programme with exposure to colleagues and being in school, and I delivered sessions and I had some work to undertake to pass it. And that actually closed the gap between the type of employee that we were trying to attract and the levels of skills needed for schools. So actually we review the makeup of the people undertaking apprenticeships as well, because we see that as a mechanism to increase diversity.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely example of positive action.
For most of our contracts, actually, you just need a level 6. So we're fewer people doing a level 7, but we have people doing level 4 and level 6 as well.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm sorry that was so short. We could go on for hours. But we have got through the speakers as well. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And I'm sure there'll be lots of other points we want to pick up. So Danielle, we're on to you now. Hopefully your slides will work. If not, let me know and I can try and do them.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. I was furiously scribbling notes down there as you were talking, and lots of interesting ideas and things that I want to go back and reflect on. And also thanks to the speakers this afternoon, some really interesting discussion. Just bringing this up on screen now. Can you see my slide?
Yeah, we can.
Brilliant.
And you're on slideshow.
Thank you. Let's whiz through this then, because I'm conscious I've only got 10 minutes and I could happily talk for 10 hours on this subject. I'm from Career Connect, and I've been with the organisation since about 2002. My background is careers guidance before joining what was then the Connections service for Greater Merseyside, but always been really passionate about diversity and inclusion. So a bit of brief context about us as a charity then. We're based in the Northwest, although we are now delivering contracts right across the UK. A lot of our work is in schools, prisons, probation service. We hold the contract for NEET and engagement services for young people with, I think, 7 or 8 different local authorities now in the Northwest. We do outplacement for people facing redundancy in career management, and we're also an accredited provider of careers education, advice and guidance qualifications. So we deliver the qualifications from the level 2 right through to the level 6, as well as careers leaders. So we're a significant size as a charity, although not as big as Shaw Trust, Michelle. We have 336 people when I did the head count on Friday, and I will go on to talk a little bit about our workforce profile, what that looks like now, what's it looked like a couple of years ago, and then my plan really is just to share with you some of the things we've tried, some of the things that we've done to help improve the diversity of our workforce profile. Still a long way to go. This isn't, by any means presented as us having the answers. Really, just some of the things that have worked for us. I've also put on the screen a couple of the awards that we've had. We have been awarded the Investors in Diversity Award, which is from the National Centre for Diversity. we're a disability confident leader, and we're really proud to be placed in the top 50 of the top 100 most inclusive workplaces last year. Okay, so the next slide, I'll just give you a minute to kind of see what I've done here. I've just I pulled these figures off on Friday to have a look at where we were and where we are today. So on the left column, obviously you've got our stats from 2019, and then the column on the right is where we were on Friday when I pulled this information. And I'll just highlight some of what I feel that is telling us. So looking at the figures from 2019, then we were 9% Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, and we've worked really hard to increase that diversity up to 12.7% now. So that's huge progress for us, but you know, this isn't a quick fix. None of us is going to achieve overnight success in this work, so still a long way to go if we want to be diversely reflective of the young people in our regions, but it's really positive to see that we're heading in the right direction. A small increase in the number of people who prefer not to state, but that's because we've really worked hard on addressing the data gaps that we had, because back in 2019 we didn't really have an accurate picture of who we were as an organisation. There was 12% of our staff had not given us any data on their ethnicity and their background, and really proud to say that today we know the ethnicity for all of our staff, bar those 4 people, or 1.2%, who have told us that they prefer not to state, and that's absolutely fine. We respect that decision. And you know, looking at how we've done that, I'll go on in the next slide to talk a bit more about how we've addressed those data gaps. As we've worked through, we've done a lot of talking to our people about why this is important, about the benefits for the organisation and addressing some of the underrepresentation in our teams. We've also seen that whilst back in 2019 we had high numbers of staff with disability or long-term health issues, we've seen an increase in the numbers of staff reporting that as well. And I think that's just a positive consequence, really, of creating a culture where staff feel that they're able to come to us and talk about health needs or reasonable adjustments, or how we might support them better in the workplace. The next line down, around the gender balance, this really is starting to concern me. Our gender profile always sat around 27–28% male, and looking at these figures now, as you'll see, we are facing reducing numbers of male staff in the organisation. And you know, even worse, if I was to give you, we obviously do break down into specific ethnic groups in our profile there. So if we were to break down and map over, you know, age with ethnicity, with gender, you know, it's not a good picture. So we don't have any young Black males, for example, at all in the organisation. And despite best efforts, we're not seeming to attract that group at all at the moment. So just to highlight a little bit of what is working, just bear with me whilst I move my chat box. Okay, so how did we manage to fill all those data gaps? Well, we've done the obvious things, such as, you know, the monitoring questionnaire recruitment. At the recruitment stage is a good place to do that. People generally are really happy to complete that information and tell you the EDI data. We have done some promotion on the intranet, telling people why we've asked them for that information. We've done an audit. We've encouraged team managers to talk about it at team meetings. And then we got down to a small minority of people who hadn't provided that information, and we ended up just phoning them and having a chat. Why is it that, we've asked you to complete that information and you've not? And what we found on the whole, once we had that conversation, we explained why we were asking for the information. People generally were more than happy to share the information. And so we now have a very clear picture of our workforce and who they are. Like Michelle, we work hard on our recruitment. We're conscious of where we recruit, the messages we're using in our adverts, the images that accompany our adverts, and thinking specifically about social media, where those photographs that sit in your job adverts are really so important. That we've been really conscious of that, ensuring that they're diversely representative. We did a diversity audit on our website. And we've also worked on our Glassdoor profile. So there's a section, people who are using Glassdoor, there's a section in there for organisations to give an update on their equality and diversity commitments, what's important to them. But also, what's positive to see is that amongst the reviews that people have left for us, people are talking positively about the support that they get in the workplace, the reasonable adjustment, the supportive, friendly teams. So, we're trying to ensure that the organisation is a welcoming place to work. We've also, in addition to our recruitment strategy, we've focused on retaining good people, and we've set up a staff diversity group. We've trained all our staff in equality and diversity. We've raised awareness within teams and through our corporate communications. We have, I'm sure, like many other careers guidance organisations, we've faced challenges in recruitment, particularly where we're trying to recruit people with level 6, level 7 qualifications, especially to work in schools. So, we've adopted a grow our own strategy with trainee careers advisors. We did a massive Kickstart programme. We recruited 30 people through Kickstart. We've been able to use positive action through a lot of this recruitment, and also increased our investment in CPD so that people want to work for us, and people want to stay, and people feel that they're growing and developing in the job. And finally, the last couple of items that I've just listed there are the Investors in Diversity accreditation process. And we found that that really challenged us and supported us as well through the National Centre for Diversity. And I feel that it really stretched us to think beyond just those protected characteristics, race, gender, ethnicity, disability, but really think about those broader categories. They talk about FREDI as a framework, and that's been hugely beneficial for us. So finally, I just wanted to end on some of the challenges really that we face and the backdrop, and reference the report published by Careers England in December. So it was workforce recruitment and retention. And, this issue that we've been talking about today in terms of the workforce diversity, this is against a backdrop where the sector as a whole is seeing higher than average turnover, and the report suggests as high as 38% against the labour market as a whole, somewhere between 15 and 17% turnover. So people are leaving our sector, and we really need to think about why that is. And most commonly, people are leaving because of poor pay, and we've all seen, some of the challenges around funding for our sector, and a sense that there is a lack of progression. The average careers advisor salary is 27,700, and so when we think about that against a teacher's starting salary, 28,000, and that goes up to 38,000, depending whereabouts in the country you live. We need to make our profession more attractive to people. We used to see quite a lot of ex-teachers applying to come in and train as careers advisors, and it feels very much like that has dropped off. And I think one of the speakers earlier referred to our profession, being seen as the poor cousins. The report published by Careers England also references stress that is created by those payment by results contracts. So there is a call from Careers England for a careers profession task force to address the urgent workforce shortages, talk about unfair pay, and that also includes increased diversity and workforce planning. So I will stop sharing my screen there.
Thank you, Danielle. Really, really interesting approaches there. So I think we've got a couple of minutes. There was one question I did see in the chat. Catherine says, Freddie, ?
Yes. So I've written it down. I thought that might come up as a question. I always get this wrong. So it's fairness. Let me find it. Fairness, respect, equality, diversity, inclusion, and engagement. So it's really, it's just stretching us to broaden some of the areas of focus. And the Investors in Diversity journey for us began with our assessor came in and did a survey of all staff, and it was a really detailed survey mapped against those headings covered by Freddie. Yeah, but on the National Centre for Diversity, there's a lot more on there around their framework and the accreditation process. Brilliant, thank you for that recommendation. So have we got time? Any questions, any burning questions that we've got? I know Emma's put in about salary definitely needs attention, very much an issue of class. I do have a view myself about, feminised professions and poor salary. I need to find a bit more evidence around that. Jan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. I'm really interested to know how your colleagues felt about being phoned with an EDI related question. How did that go down?
Yeah, really well. And, I started those conversations by saying to people that there is a heading on our drop-down menu for you to choose not to state. So, if that's your choice, we absolutely respect that. But the issue that we had was that we just had gaps in the data, so we didn't know why people weren't sharing that information. So through those calls, I didn't come across any major resistance from people. There was no sense of suspicion as to why we wanted it. But those phone calls followed the very end of, about a 4-month process of articles on our intranet, discussions at team meetings, information from our staff equality and diversity group, talking to colleagues about why it's important. So by the time we came to that small handful of people that we telephoned, they'd had every opportunity to understand why we were asking those questions. A lot of people just haven't got round to it.
And so did you make those calls yourself then? So the call came from you. So that might have made a difference as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you for sharing that.
And interesting, Michelle's put in as well that they used the staff networks to spread the word about the importance of D&I data. I think that comment about data, I think, is incredibly useful. Right, I think we'll move on to Nalini now. Yes, it is. Just checking my list. Yes, it is Nalini. So it's over to you, Nalini.
Thank you. So in a whole host of ways, I'm not taking the stance of my previous presenters, who I congratulate on being organised enough to have slides. I'd like to think that I'd say that this was a deliberate Nalini uncut, but it's not. But I am really, really pleased to be here. And thank you, Siobhan, for explaining why I'm here, because if you looked at my title, you might think that I'm an interloper. But if this had taken place in September as planned, I would have introduced myself as the Director of Careers and Employability at the University of Nottingham and the Equality Director for AGCAS, the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services, but a lot can happen in 3 months. So I am now the Director of Planning, Performance and Strategic Change at the University of Nottingham. I retain my strong belief in the skill sets that one develops as a careers advisor and the extent to which that they can be transferable. Some of you will know my doctorate was on the professional identity of careers advisors in higher education. I believe very strongly it's a really powerful skill set, although I am stress testing it somewhat with my current move. So it's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I hope that the thoughts that I'm going to share will contribute to the discussion that we've been having. I have checked in with Elaine Boyce, the Chief Executive of AGCAS, and Pauline Maiden, who is now the Director of Careers and Employability at the University of Nottingham. So I am authorised to speak about both of those organisations, unless I say anything contentious or upsetting, in which case all the fire must come to me. Okay, that's how we're going to do this. So I thought I'd start by talking about the HE profession as a whole, and really looking through the lens of AGCAS. And I've always thought it interesting because my view is that within universities, particularly higher education, career services and the professionals within, have always been really committed to supporting the diversity of their students and equity of opportunity and enabling people to realise their potential. But absolutely, as some of the discussion this afternoon has shown, we're not yet there with our actual workforce, and there is some catching up to do. And I think AGCAS is very committed to diversifying the workforce, and would recognise many of the challenges that have been articulated today. And many institutions, and I'm about to give an example, and you won't be surprised which one I've picked, are doing what they can to try and diversify their workforce. But AGCAS as a professional association is looking to take a lead on this, and so has just concluded a survey of its members around the challenges and opportunities regarding diversity of the workforce. And there is a Heads of Service conference in March where the results are going to be shared, and from that actions will be identified so that AGCAS can work out how best to support its member services in increasing that diversity of our profession. So there is action going on at that level, and there is a lot of good practice to draw upon, and hopefully the survey will draw that out too. But what I'm going to just bring to life a little bit is one example, the one I know best, the University of Nottingham, is an illustration of perhaps how this could be approached. I'm not suggesting it's the only way by any measure, but perhaps it might resonate and give people some pause for thought. So I moved to the University of Nottingham as the Director of Careers and Employability. I was there for 9 1/3 years, which is tidy. At least it was a number of months that fell into a fraction. I'd previously been at the University of Leeds, and I believe that I am genuinely committed to the value of diversity within workforces. And I inherited an excellent team of colleagues, and I have left behind a really excellent team of colleagues. But when I arrived, one of the things that I wanted to do as a Director of Careers, I had a few concepts and ideas I wanted to test. One was that I really believed in careers advisors, and we were going through a phase where careers advisors were seen as being a problem. So I wanted to prove that actually careers advisors were brilliant and were always the solution. I also was interested to see how diverse I could make the careers workforce at the University of Nottingham, because of the strength of diversity, which I believe is a real positive asset when you're building teams, but also to represent our student body. I know the University of Nottingham has a particular reputation as being a type of university, and we do have an ivory tower, literally. So, you know, we have to be very honest about who we are, but we do have quite a diverse student body behind that ivory tower. And to me, it was really important that as far as possible, the careers service reflected our students. And when I got there and I looked at where I needed to perhaps look at diversity of our workforce, I noticed an absence of males, younger males, older males, single males, not that many first generation into HE, actually, a lack of STEM background. Nottingham is predominantly a STEM university, but actually very few people that came from those backgrounds were working in the service. There wasn't a lot of representation of people who had declared a disability, and there wasn't much of a representation on the race front. Of course, I did wonders for our statistics simply by turning up, but I didn't want to rely on that. So there was quite a lot to go at, actually, in terms of broadening the workforce. And it wasn't about having poor colleagues, it was just about, as we got the opportunities to recruit, how did we build that diversity? And when I think back, there were two things that I did in order to try and help that to happen. The first was culture change across the university service, actually across the university career service, particularly with managers, to help them and support them to be more comfortable with a greater degree of discomfort. Because when you have a homogeneous workforce, I always say homogeneous, which is milk, but when you have that very undiverse workforce, the introduction of difference actually can be quite unsettling and feel quite challenging. So until and unless you support your teams to be more comfortable with that, it's very hard then to genuinely introduce diversity into your workforce, and also not just helping them to be comfortable with discomfort, but also helping them to be allies. So that when we do bring people in from different backgrounds, their allies can be the people that they work with, and they don't have to try and hunt out people like them. Because when you are trying to diversify, sometimes the first person in doesn't find a person like them. So the more you can build that capability, the better then I feel you can lay the ground for diversification. I mean, certainly for me, my best career ally is Dr. Bob Gilworth, who some of you will be perhaps familiar with in terms of his work. He's been my greatest career ally, and he's a white man. So on paper, he probably wasn't cut out for the job, but it isn't about characteristics. It's about understanding, it's about intent, it's about willingness. So that culture change to me was laying the ground. And then, of course, inclusive recruitment. And we've heard some outstanding examples of that from other speakers here today. And so when we were recruiting, I made sure that there was an EDI champion who had a lot of power on every single recruitment panel, regardless of level. And actually, I'm talking about myself. Arguably, as the director of careers, I should have or could have been too busy and important to sit on every single recruitment panel. When you have a service of 65 with turnover, and Nottingham is now a service of 80, there's a lot of recruitment that goes on. But actually, if you're going to commit to it, you have to commit the time. And so being there to have those conversations, to see the selection, to be able to talk to managers, to reassure them, to discuss why we may or may not select a candidate, I think was a really important part of it. And we really interrogated our own questions and the way that we selected and the activities that we asked people to go through, and really tried to stand in the shoes of potential candidates, and candidates not from the sector and candidates not from a university like Nottingham, to work out how we can absolutely go through a robust recruitment and selection process, but that it would be done in a way that made it accessible to people who may not be used to operating in our space. And while we were doing all of that, the University of Nottingham itself as an organisation was becoming very committed to EDI. So we were the first university, I believe, to have a Pro-Vice-Chancellor whose portfolio was EDI. And there was a real push to try and make sure that we embedded this across the institution. And we now have a strategic development plan for EDI as one of our key strategic imperatives. And so our approaches to recruitment, and as many as our speakers have said, how we describe ourselves, how we make ourselves accessible, has developed. And so we've been delighted to do that. So we now, the Career Service does anonymised shortlisting to help us to make sure that when we do shortlist, we're bringing in as diverse a range of people as possible. And, you know, as the university has been engaging in reverse mentoring programs and, you know, a lot of awareness and encouragement of people to consider EDI, it also means sometimes you get some quite good internal recruitment, because people come into the university, into another part of the university, and potentially move into the Career Service. So it also broadens your talent pool if you're in a large organisation, which has been really helpful. So that's quite a personal lens on it, but hopefully has given you an insight to some of the things that we've done. The last thing I'm going to say is potentially controversial, but those of you that know me, I can't finish without saying something else. And I understand that it is not good form to problematise those who are trying to be part of a more diverse workforce and can't get through the door. The last thing I would say as a careers professional who started off working in schools and moved into further education and then moved into higher education, that gap is harder and harder to bridge as the work of higher education career services has moved further and further away perhaps from the work that is typically carried out in schools and colleges. And I have found myself in a position sometimes where we've been really excited by the diversity of a shortlist, but have found ourselves in the interview unable to make the kind of appointment that could have further added to our diversity, because the candidates that we were meeting didn't know enough about the HE space and how we operate and graduate outcomes and how we work in the curriculum. And it's not that they aren't capable and wouldn't have been really good at it, but they weren't able in the interview to express enough for us to legitimately reach out and make an offer sometimes. And so what I would say is that HE careers services are trying, but we would be really helped if people could help us by really understanding our space. And as the quality director at ADCAS, two things that I did that I think will help is that we mapped out professional pathways across the profession to make it really clear the sorts of things people needed to know. And we introduced a very transparent quality standard to show all the things that career services would do. And I think we have to make ourselves more accessible in lots and lots of ways. And one of them now, even though we're all of the same profession, is subject matter in terms of what we do. So I hope that that is a way of reaching out. I hope the Nottingham story is an insight into how I'm sure a lot of institutions are operating now. And I hope that gives you something to think about in terms of some of the steps that this area of the careers profession is taking to try and be more diverse.
Thank you, Nalini. Really, I think again, having these personal stories of how different parts of the sector are addressing the issues is helpful. We've got probably 2 or 3 minutes if there's any comments or questions for Nalini at this point. I'll just have a look at the list, see if I can see any hands.
So Michelle has asked about introductory days like London Careers Group. I'm really glad they do that. We don't, because we don't tend to operate on the same scale as the Careers Group, because the Careers Group is an umbrella for 10 services. But we do try when people are interested, and I would always encourage people to talk to HE careers advisors and people in the space to help that understanding, because our institutions and the Office for Students and the general HE narrative is pushing career services in a particular way, and it is much harder sometimes to appreciate that gap. And it's not a skills gap, it's not a capability gap, it's just that different setting and people being able to help to see themselves in that role.
Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. And I think what you highlight, which I think is becoming increasingly evident, is there's a whole mythology about higher education and career services that just isn't true. And I know I've spoken with ACAS about that. Thank you.
I'm going to put 3 things in the chat if that's okay. One is the Harvard Business Review article on why diversity means discomfort, but actually is a really positive thing, which I read actually yesterday and was really thought-provoking, and the links to the ACAS documents that I talked about.
Thank you. That's brilliant. So while you're doing that, can I invite Sandra Cowley from Futures for You, who's our last presenter today? And I'm sorry you've got the tail end of the afternoon, but really looking forward to hearing what you've got to share with us.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. Thanks for inviting me. My director of HR is on holiday in Tenerife, hence why you've got me. So I've got a few slides, and it's quite interesting. Some of what I've got already people have spoken about, so I'm going to skip over a couple. So I'll just share my screen. Hopefully. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay, all right then, let's have a see. So it says share, okay, tab preview. Oh, okay. Let me just see, should, oh, bear with me, I'm not a Zoom expert. I am more of a Teams. So entire screen. I'm going to try and see if this works. So bear with me. Oh, it's not letting me do it. Sorry. No.
Michael, is there anything we can do? Have we got a copy of your slides? Oh,
yeah.
Michael's. Oh, there you go. Michael's doing it. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, let me just cancel everything out then. Sorry, can't find the cancel. Right, yeah, thank you. So yeah, so I'm Sandra Cowley. I'm Director of Strategy, Growth and Partnerships. I am a careers advisor, or I was one a long time ago. I think I got qualified in the 1990s. Would you like to just push on the slide? Just a little bit about Futures. So as we are a prime for the National Career Service for the East Midlands and East of England, and have been for about the last 9 years, but been 27 years as a social enterprise. Deliver NEAT services in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, specialist career services and support, and more recently over the last 2 to 3 years been delivering in partnership with Improving Access to Psychological Therapies and looking at careers advice, really key in mental health, and supporting people into work or who are already in work to actually with their mental health, but through careers as well. Next slide. So what I have done is shared with you. So currently we have 430 colleagues. As I say, we deliver careers advice services, but employment services as well. That's some of the information there. So our profile. So I think some of what Danielle and others have said that we have got an ageing female workforce. I actually was the chair of the task group for Careers of England, and that's one of our real worries of people leaving the sector. One, because of salaries, because the funding is just not there anymore to be able to keep up with certain other sectors. So we're doing a lot of work really on trying to encourage people to come and work for us, but also to retain the workforce that we've got. Our attrition rate at the moment is around 30%. And that is probably not from our long-standing careers advisors at the moment, but it's more from people coming into the sector and really realising maybe it's not for them, and so leaving the sector. And I don't know if other people have experienced that in the last couple of years, that churn of staff. But yeah, so it's something that we have looked at, and part of our people plan to look at how we recruit staff, but how we retain staff. And that was probably one of the areas that I was going to really focus on. So if you want to go on to the next slide. So what we've been doing really is looking at, because we spread over the East Midlands and East of England, really look at collaborative partnerships in those local communities. And that is a way that we can promote vacancies to make sure the careers advisors that work locally actually represent those local communities. And from there have really started to then form partnerships, a promotion of our vacancies that we've got. We do offer trainee careers by the pathways and also that's supported by our own delivery of level 2 to level 6 advice and guidance qualifications. So we have a professional development centre that's been operating for about 10 years now, really to support people to gain those qualifications and fund those qualifications ourselves. So not ask the participants to pay for those, and also been working with other organisations. I think staff engagement for us has been a real key around, as part of that recruitment strategy and retention strategy. How do we recruit? How do we keep people engaged, and how we do recruit from those workforce from those local communities? And so some of that is really trying to have a more flexible approach. So we do a lot more flexible working, hybrid working, job sharing, to again engage really more with those local communities and people to come and work for us. But it's not easy. You know, it is a challenge we have all the time to balance the needs of what we need to do as a business, but also to make sure that people come to work for us and then stay with us. I think, you know, we've talked about this, somebody else has talked about this, reviewing our policies. I think one of the previous discussions when I came on was, you know, terminology and language. And I think always making sure our policies and the way that we work actually and talk is kept up to date really is to engage people into the roles of careers advice, and also to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. As I said, providing what we don't also provide qualifications for ourselves, but also to other organisations, and going in and funding those, trying to find funding to help community groups and voluntary sector organisations to actually get qualified and then see themselves as a career pathway, or get people to see themselves in that careers pathway. We have a very close partnership with Careers Enterprise Company and actually host 3 career enterprise coordinators within Futures that go into schools, and I on a regular basis go into schools, because I think one of the things that we don't do enough of and shout about as a sector is promote career professionals in schools as a profession. So, you know, if people think that they want to be a careers advisor, that's not really, you go and see a careers advisor about your career at school or in college or in university, but do we talk about it as a profession? So I've been going back into education to talk about that and to try and promote that as a sector, because I think we have to start from young people as well, thinking about it as a profession and something that they can go into and promoting that. The other area that we have done, we just actually stopped, but we used to, and for the last 3 years, delivered the level 6 career development professional ourselves to our own staff, but also to other organisations, a way of for those that can't afford to fund their own qualifications, through, you know, be able to fund it through the levy, and to support people through, we had some kickstart people who came and then continued and now are careers advisors with us. Unfortunately, due to funding and the cost of living, we've decided to pull out of apprenticeships, and so that is not something, but we can still promote that going forward, because I think that also gives the profession some kudos if you can get people qualified to those levels. But where it's not affordable for people to pay for themselves, actually the levy allows us to do that. You know, I think we're not anywhere near some of what the other organisations have talked about, but we do try as part of our people plan to engage through staff forums and through our specialist support groups to really try and make sure the workforce that we have represents the communities that we work in. But you know, I don't think there's any easy answers, as we've heard from everybody today. I think it's just something that we have to be committed to as futures are and continue to work on. And that's it from me.
Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for
thank you.
sorting
Yes,
the tech
thank
out
you.
there for us. It's been an ongoing problem all day today. That again, really interesting in terms of the strategies that you've been adopting. So I don't know if we've got any other questions, comments from colleagues in the group for Sandra at this point.
I'm just going
to put the light on, I think.
Very dark.
That's the problem at this time of the year. You start a conversation and then you find
mushroom.
Yeah, you do. You find you're in mushroom world, definitely. So I don't know if somebody's got to leave us now. Thank you, Tanya, for letting us know. There's something I was going to ask about. One of the things that I think is really interesting, and again, I don't know that we know a lot about this, but I'm very aware that a lot of the Winding Access and the UniConnect colleagues are professionally qualified careers advisors, and they're often much more diverse in terms of background and gender and you know, inclusion generally, but we don't seem to get them into the profession as mainstream careers advisors. And I do wonder whether that is an area that we've sort of missed a bit of a trick on. I don't know, it's just an observation, having spent quite a bit of time with our team at the University of Derby. Anyway, that's gone to silence.
I think we've taken some people from your team. Yeah, a couple.
Yeah. Okay. Right then. Well, I'm conscious of time. It's 4:45 now. We were going to do another exercise, but I won't. I think it'd be much more useful if we've got any other questions or observations that people would like to make about any of the discussions we've had, the presentations we've had today. And also, thank you, Catherine, for putting your takeaway in about trainee positions. And Sarah be interested in the article Nalini's mentioned. Jill, it's
in the chat.
It's in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jill, you've got a question.
Well, it's a comment based on what Catherine said about trainee positions, because I'm sure Michelle Stewart would agree with me on this, that, you know, the apprenticeship route is designed, you know, that is one of the reasons it's designed is to try to provide those sorts of training routes. But I don't know the detail, but I do know that for our apprenticeship at Warwick, there were some employers who couldn't recruit to trainee positions in time for our programme start, our most recent programme start. So I don't know why that is, and just thought I'd offer that perspective, see if anyone has any thoughts about that.
Just while people are having thoughts about that, Jan's made a comment about one thing that would help diversity would be to make the profession a protected profession. There is work, the CDI is doing some work with colleagues at NICEC here at the University of Derby around chartership, and that may be something that would be progressing. And I think I think one of the observations I would make is around that there aren't undergraduate programs in careers work. There's been occasional elements of it. I know University of Northumberland have. So young people don't see being a careers advisor other than their experience in school, which may be 30 minutes, you know, over the whole time that they've been there. So the exposure is quite limited. So as a number of colleagues have said about how important it is to be promoting the profession and getting out there and people seeing it as, you know, an interesting, you know, diverse and, you know, really fulfilling career. And we need to find ways of getting that message out there. And, you know, that's something that the professional associations, I know David's here from the CDI and I'm sure Elaine at ACAS are considering. And so it's things that we need to look at. Let me just see, Nalini, I'm not sure your links are being clear.
Because I sent them to one person because I'm an idiot, but I've now put them in the chat for everybody, so sorry about
that. We all do it. Emma, you've got your hand up as well. Emma Pollard.
Thanks, Siobhan. Sorry, I think Jill might have been first, but I think I was just struck by the kind of retention issues, and I think what was said about people leaving earlier on. So I think there's that point about raising the profile of the profession and getting people interested in it. But is there some sort of mis-selling going on or misunderstanding going on if people are coming in and then leaving again quite quickly? And what kinds of people are leaving is interesting. I'm all about the data, and I'm really pleased that there's been a real big push about getting more data so we can really understand this.
I think the data is key. Yeah, absolutely.
I think what Jill said and what I was saying about the culture change, so that because you can bring people in through inclusive recruitment, but if you bring them into an environment that hasn't really reflected upon how it needs to diversify in and of itself to welcome people from different backgrounds, you could be bringing people in through inclusive recruitment and then ask them to be somebody that they're not. And the whole point of the recruitment was to be able to overcome that, but then the setting in which they work has to be able to carry that through. I don't have any data, sorry, but that is my observation. Is that sometimes, you know, there is it's you know, there's been a lot of emphasis on the recruitment side of things, but actually for the retention there needs to be underpinning culture change at the same time, which takes a long time and is hard work and is a ton of time and tends to be a kind of, you know, on the side of the desk type activity.
Yeah, and as Emma Bolger says, it's about progression routes too, where are the promotion opportunities and being able to you know, progress your career as well, because we do know from research that we've done, and we keep coming up with the same things all the time, you know, the access to CPD, lack of career opportunity, lack of progression routes generally, because often careers companies can be quite flat. So it's practice and management. Sandra, you've got your hand up now.
Yeah, I was just going to answer that from our perspective. Some of it was we brought in a new programme and the challenges, to be honest, the challenges of setting that programme up. I think some of it is people's expectation of that progression being maybe, you know, they'll progress in a year or 2 years, when actually luckily people aren't leaving that are in those higher roles. So there was all sorts of different reasons, and just people leaving for another £1,000 with another provider or another organisation because you're competing. So there's all sorts of different reasons, but I think, and flexibility, where we ask for staff to be face-to-face rather than all hybrid, that has also, people have come, but then when they realise they can do more online delivery and online IAG, where we like quite a lot of it to be face-to-face, again, people, there's job opportunities out there, and so lots of different reasons, and trying to pick up, not try and deal with them all at once, but try and make sure that people understand the role they're coming into. Payment by results contracts for those delivering on the National Career Service. You know, it's not just you can talk as how, you know, you've got time restraints on how many customers you need to see to make that contract viable, and all these things I think lead to you can explain things at interview, you can recruit, but actually the reality sometimes. And my daughter came to work for us in the National Careers Service, qualified, and then said, this isn't for me, because it's just unfortunately the pace of what you have to work at sometimes. So yeah, I just wanted to really say that.
Thank you for that. One of the things we would encourage colleagues to do, based on the talks and the discussions we've had, is if you want to put in the chat perhaps 2 or 3 things that you think that, you know, we as a sector and we as a profession need to be doing to address some of the issues around EDI for us, you know, because to all intents and purposes, you know, a lot of us here are in the latter part of our career, you know, where, you know, and I'm definitely putting it, it's 33 years since I trained as a careers advisor. It's a long time ago. You know, we are a lot of us are that aging population that will be leaving, and, you know, we're taking that experience with us, and we need to have the next generation who are coming through, and those role models. Yeah, Nalini, you talked about role models. Somebody else talked about role models, and I totally agree. I know for me that when I came into the profession, it was the role models that kept me there, and you know, kept my, you know, trained me to do the job, sort of thing. So I think there are some really important issues here that we at NICEC need to be taking on board in terms of, you know, thought leadership within the sector, as do CDI, as do ICAS, as do other colleagues as well. Thank you. I hope not, Emma, although I do know, and I think it's somebody in Futures who is in their 80s who is still working as a careers advisor, and good luck to them. I shall be not, if I can help it, working when I'm in my 80s across the sector. But there you go. Thank you, Michelle. You've put one of the reports in. And Gill said, my priority is to be a good role model and mentor to newer professionals and support them. Absolutely. So that's 2 of the things that we could do. So please do put your thoughts in about what else we need to put in place. Michael, are we able to download all of the chats? Because I know I can't do it on my system for some reason. It doesn't particularly like it.
Yes, sure, I'll do that.
But if you can do, I can actually save the chat. It has decided to allow me to this time. Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, and hopefully you have all found this stimulating. We've raised a lot of questions. We set out to raise a lot of questions. We're not coming with answers. None of us have got the answers. But I think what we have been able to demonstrate is a broad sense of understanding of where we think some of the issues are. I think our employer presenters have been absolutely brilliant in giving us snapshots of the challenges as they see them within their context, because we do need to recognise and acknowledge the nuance. You know, Gill started off talking about the nuance and the complexity of the issues we're talking about, and also the geography. You know, that the issues that one area will have are not the same that another area will have. And I think having a range of employers and the strategies that they've adopted and how they're seeing change as a result, but we're all recognising it takes time, and there are a number of systemic issues that also we acknowledge and recognise that need addressing in terms of the profession and moving forward with the profession. And, you know, I welcome, you know, what Sandra's talking about, going into schools and promoting the profession of being a careers advisor. We wouldn't all still be in this sector if we didn't believe in it, and we didn't care about the work that we do, whether it's from the practice perspective, whether it's from we're managing practitioners, we're training practitioners, we're researching the sector. We all care passionately about this work, and we want it to be the best it can be. So can I thank all of our presenters today? I know how much work goes in to these events. Apologies for the few hiccups we've had in terms of the IT. It's always IT, isn't it? But what it does mean is that we can get, you know, 35 40 people to this event, whereas, you know, if we're all going to London, there probably won't be that many of us. So thank you all for your contributions. It's been brilliant, and this is the start of the discussion. And I know Ifza and David Morgan would ask me to remind people about their events on 26th, 27th of January. The CDI are running around in EDI, and making sure we get a good breadth of practitioners contributing to that. So thank you all very much. And the next NICEC event, Claire, do you want to say when it is and what it is? I'll put Claire Nix on the spot now. Or Emma, either.
It's on the 14th of March. The details in essence have gone up on the website, and it's on ethics and occupational choice, and Anthony Barnes and Tristram and hopefully some others will be contributing to the debate on that. It's a much shorter event. It's just a seminar, so it's 5 till 6:30 at the end of the day, which might challenge inequality and access terms.
Well, this is it.
There you go.
Well, we're looking for feedback on that sort of thing as an organisation. So please tell us, folks, what should NICEC be doing.
That's it. Okay, lovely to see you all. Thank you so much. Please do get in contact with any of us if you've got any other further thoughts. As we said, we will be progressing this agenda, definitely. Thank you all.